I think we're at a moment now, we're literally at a turning point at a major existential level. So let me just, maybe we park this into three phases. You know, the first phase, I call it the 80s and 90s. I think we were enamored with what I call the predictive kind of strategy approach, where we would, you know, executives would go do offsites. They would look 5-10 years into the future. They would get a McKinsey deck, would tell them the kind of the industry analytics as to if you did these kind of infrastructure investments, here's where you could end up on a kind of a 5 or 10 year track. And then you would have subsequent, you know, waterfall discussions about your 1 to 3 year, and then you'd have your annual operating plan. And you would use the tools of the day. Michael Porter's tools were well honed in at that point to understand, you know, switching cost if you lost, if you know, you had to go out and take a competitor, you know, this kind of language, you know, fit. And I think it fit because industries had emerged to a point that there was stability, at least in the technology, business model orientation that these industries were in. And then the second phase was the internet showed up. And I think the challenge with the internet in the 90s, starting late in the 90s, because, you know, we had the internet.com crash. I think that event that occurred now, and it's almost, I even hate to put it in a comparison right now, because if we talk right now, we're talking about, you know, any estimates between $11 trillion that have evaporated in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The entire internet.com crash of 2001 or so, during that time frame, it was maybe $1 trillion. You know, it was big at the time, and I think we learned lessons from that, where innovation, investments, and strategy were about, well, you know, we can bet on technology and platform plays, but as history has shown, the .com crash, because companies that could not generate free cash flow in a specific period of time, the rug was just taken out. It was such a major shift, and the failure rate, which I call a learning cycle, you know, fed the next cycle, which is okay. Well, we still got to go do technology, but now we really need to be more sophisticated in how we de-risk our innovation projects, et cetera. So I think at that point, strategy had to become a little bit more sophisticated, because the portfolios of work were now including what I call higher risk Horizon 3 type of plays. And I think from that perspective, the tools that were required were very different. You had to model your risk in your decision making. So there was a course at Stanford that we had on strategic decision making from the strategic decisions group, which really fit really well. You could go in and use a lot of what I call analytic intelligence to really make better bets on, you know, scenario plays, et cetera. And then the third phase, which I think we're in now, and I'm talking about the COVID world, is while we've talked about this probably for the last 5 years, the notion of volatility, uncertainty, you know, complexity, and ambiguity, we know this is VUCA, right? A lot of companies have, I think to a large degree, have ignored this. And I'll tell you why. I think that the global expansion, because of quantitative easing and the capital and the money that was put into the marketplace after 2008, is that there was kind of a free ride on equity in the marketplace, venture capital that was in the marketplace. And to a large degree, we could hide a lot of what I call the corporate inefficiencies, where, you know, SWOTs, you know, why we might have some weaknesses and some threats. Overall, companies were able to hide a little bit of their, if you would, their non-performance in a constantly growing market that was expanding because of urbanization and these things of the population growth that were going on. But I do believe now that we're entering a phase where VUCA is certainly getting redefined as we talk today, that uncertainty and the ability to predict is almost gone to zero. And it's now speculation. And what speculations are you going to try to look at in order to govern your company? And as I told you earlier this morning, I was on conversations with client. These are executives, and they're struggling with, what do we bet on? If we place the wrong bet right now and we think that the recovery will come in 3 months, there's a different answer of what we do today. If we think it's 6 months, it's very different in terms of what we need to do today. And if we delay that decision, there's a cost to the organization. And I would also say now that what I hear, and there's a deeper concern, honestly, about what do we do with the people? Because back in the .com crash days with people, if the companies went belly up, you could get a job the next day. There was another company, Cisco, Sun Microsystems, I could go on and on, that were big enough in absorbing this that they could go in. But today, I think it's a little bit different story as far as what kind of talent you need and the talent you have to have on your organization. So I think that the factoring in of people has become far more important, and that strategy has to represent the capacity and the ability of your organization just to execute. And without people, you can't execute. It's that simple. So I think that shift now is also being factored into this. So you see a lot of companies going, you know what, we'll let you go home, but we're going to pay for you because we want you back. We want to be known as the company that did not abandon its people when times got tough. And so strategy is always, to me, is always a function of your competence and your capability to execute what you think you're trying to get to. So overall, I think that there's been 3 periods in the last 30 years that we've seen really significant shifts in the market and in the world, some driven by finance, some driven by technology and other things that are shifting the way we have to plan, which is good. And I think we're at a moment now, we're literally at a turning point at a major existential level as to how we think about planning